Whether you like him or not, you have to admit that Gojo is one of the most overpowered characters in all of anime. And it's not just because he looks handsome. He actually has an entire arsenal of OP abilities that helped him become one of the strongest, if not the strongest, Jujutsu sorcerer of all time, if it weren't for Sukuna. So that's why we're going to be explaining and then ranking all of Gojo Satoru's powers. And as always, spoilers ahead. There are a total of 13 that we'll be talking about. And you might be surprised that the first one is a technique that even the weakest characters can do. It's called Curtain. And we first saw it in episode 4 of the anime where Kyota Ijichi, the relatively weak assistant director of Tokyo Jujutsu High, activated it. When this is done, a dark matter slowly drips down in a sphere-like formation in the sky and makes it look like it's night, which in turn tricks cursed spirits into coming out of hiding. What's cool about this ability is that anything within it cannot be seen by anyone from the outside. This is a great way to stop non-sorcerers from seeing the commotion that's about to happen from the inside. Although if you are a sorcerer, you could most likely see the curtain's outside shell. To sum it up, it's basically a barrier technique that hides the Jujutsu sorcerer's abilities from the public. I ranked it as Gojo's weakest ability because it's more of a support technique than anything else. It doesn't do any sort of damage, and if a sorcerer is strong enough, they can break a curtain with ease. But there is a cool side mechanic for this technique. If you apply a binding vow to it, you can basically customize its effects. We saw this when back in the Goodwill event, the curtain did not allow Gojo Satoru to pass through, and in exchange, other sorcerers could just walk in without any restrictions. This isn't the only way you can apply a binding vow. It can be changed to targeting a single individual/entity, blocking them or even trapping them inside. But we all know your mom is so big that a curtain made by Gojo Satoru couldn't even trap her. Anyway, moving on. We have another technique, but this one wasn't even shown in the anime yet, so spoilers ahead. This one is called New Shadow Style, Simple Domain. To be honest, it was shown in the anime, but it wasn't used by Gojo. Instead, it was used by Kasumi Miwa during her last-ditch effort to attack Pseudo Geto. But we all know how that turned out. This was used by Gojo Satoru during his fight against Sukuna in the last arc of Jujutsu Kaisen. Although it was activated by Miwa offensively, it is a defensive anti-domain technique that can nullify the sure-hit effects of a domain expansion. Most people, even Yuji, didn't know Gojo could use this, and that's because he usually doesn't need it. It was first created during the golden age of Jujutsu during the Heian era by Sadatsuna Ashiya, where it was called the Domain for the Weak. It was first forbidden to be taught to outsiders, but it was eventually leaked, which explains why Miwa can use it. There are many different uses for this by adding a binding vow or different rules aside from countering domain expansions. For example, Miwa used it for her battle sword drawing technique, while Mekamaru used Simple Domain to damage Mahiro's soul. There was even a guy whose Simple Domain created a sumo wrestling ring. However, it has its weaknesses. When up against a powerful domain, it cannot truly block all attacks, but instead only weakens the damage. This happened during Gojo's fight against Sukuna, where he just used it to buy time. Some domains can even obliterate this technique in just seconds. It does sound cool, but it does not help Gojo most of the time, so that's why it's ranked here. But now we're getting into the cooler techniques, and you might not even know this one called Falling Blossom Emotion existed, even though it was shown once. Unlike Simple Domain or Curtain, this one is a secret art that is only known by the big three sorcerer families, the Zenin, the Gojo, and the Kamo. It is another domain counter technique, but instead of the user creating a domain around themselves to nullify a domain's sure-hit attack, this technique covers the user in cursed energy and it counterattacks any hit from the domain once it comes into contact with equal force to stop it. In the series, there are only 3 people that have used it. First is Naobito Zenin, who used Falling Blossom Emotion during the fight where the Jujutsu sorcerers had to fight against Dagon, and he managed to protect himself from Dagon's Death Swarm technique. It was all okay until Dagon managed to land a punch into Naobito, and this proved that although it can block most cursed techniques, any physical attacks can punch right through it. Another user of this technique was Maki's father, Ogi Zenin, who used it offensively against Maki. He coated his body with cursed energy but also his sword, which effectively allowed his sword to cut anything the cursed energy touched. Still, much like Simple Domain, it has its flaws, because if it's up against something like Sukuna's Malevolent Shrine, it can only weaken the attacks and not completely block them. So that's why in the world of Jujutsu Kaisen, the greatest defense is offense. Now we're done with defensive techniques, but hold your horses, because this next ability allows Gojo to have complete control over space itself. And of course, I'm talking about Limitless. Limitless is the innate technique of the Gojo clan, and it's the sole reason why infinity can be brought into reality, which gives its users the ability to manipulate and distort space. It's known that most members of the Gojo clan can be born with this technique, although it cannot be mastered if you do not possess another power, which we will be talking about later. By manipulating cursed energy, users can control space at will, even up to an atomic level. Limitless itself doesn't have any output or input, and just serves as the base for the other abilities that we'll be talking about moving forward. That's because as the user can now control space, they can apply various aspects of Limitless to it, using space itself as an offensive and defensive measure in combat. With that being said, Gojo's next power in the neutral state of Limitless is called Infinity. This was the exact ability we saw Gojo use in his initial fight against Jogo, where Gojo used Infinity to literally become invulnerable to any type of attack. It is the power to stop. And if you know advanced mathematics, which has a 0.5% chance of happening, Infinity works the same way as convergent and divergent sequences. This is why the way it stops attacks and or objects from hitting Gojo is by infinitely slowing it down to the point where it never reaches Gojo. In other words, it divides the space between Gojo and the attack infinitely. If that isn't cool enough, Gojo can expand Infinity and use the output to effectively crush anything into non-existence. Just ask Hanami during the Shibuya arc. Because even though it was a special grade cursed spirit, Hanami turned into a bloodstain on the wall just because of Infinity's pressure. The only way anyone can nullify Infinity is through a domain expansion, or when Gojo deactivates it himself. But that isn't all true, because we do know there is a countermeasure for Infinity that was used by Toji when he stabbed Gojo in every vital point known to man. It was called the Inverted Spear of Heaven, which is a cursed tool that can nullify any cursed technique it comes into contact with. Another cursed tool was Miguel's Black Rope, which he used against Gojo during Jujutsu Kaisen 0. But if you don't have a domain or those tools, you're basically only gonna hit Gojo in your dreams. And it makes you think about what would happen if Gojo added cursed energy into Limitless. Well, that's where Cursed Technique Lapse Blue comes in. Gojo can activate this by adding amplified cursed energy into Limitless itself. In turn, it creates a force of attraction, similar to a weak black hole that converges space into a single point infinitely. The most basic usage of blue is to pull a target into a single point, but when you do get hit by it, let's just say it isn't pretty. Depending on the amount of cursed energy Gojo channels, he can even make a human implode. And when Gojo uses it for high-speed movement, he can move faster than the human eye. Essentially, Gojo is also the fastest sorcerer in the current era. When Gojo used this against Juzo during the Goodwill event, it instantly twisted and crushed all 4 of Juzo's limbs before he could even react. If Gojo increased the field of attraction, he could essentially destroy buildings alongside the surrounding landscape, just like during his initial fight against Toji. But there's a secret to this technique, and it's called Cursed Technique Lapse Maximum Cursed Energy Output Blue. What Gojo does is that he creates a center of gravity so strong that it can crush and attract all known matter, just like a true black hole. Gojo can even move this point of convergence at will. This was the first purely offensive attack on this list, and the next one is the complete opposite of blue, Cursed Technique Reversal Red. Instead of attracting matter into a singular point, it repels all matter instead. This is done by amplifying Limitless with positive energy that comes from reversed cursed technique, often used to heal, instead of negative cursed energy that's used in blue. What makes it rank above blue? Well, it is stated that red's cursed energy output and force are at least twice as strong as blue. It was so strong, in fact, that when Toji blocked it with the Inverted Spear of Heaven, he instantly was blown away. Gojo even one-shotted a gigantic cursed spirit with red, and he didn't even look. And since red is twice as powerful, it's twice as complicated. Because as we all know, reverse curse technique can only be done by the most genius sorcerers. And since red runs on it, even the most skilled in the Gojo clan can rarely use it. Since Gojo is such a monster, he can even delay red's explosive trigger. Gojo can change its trajectory, and using these two mechanics, he managed to catch Sukuna by surprise and land one on his back. Gojo can change its trajectory, and using these two mechanics, he managed to catch Sukuna by surprise and land one on his back. Blue and red just sound so simple, but they become so deadly because the one that wields them is Gojo Satoru, the only chosen one throughout the heavens and the earth. Before we dive into what happens when we combine both red and blue, we've already mentioned Gojo's next power on this list. And it's none other than the reversed curse technique that powers up red. Although it didn't necessarily make it the top 5, this is perhaps one of the most important abilities that Gojo has, because without it, he wouldn't even have become the strongest sorcerer of today. Even as a second year, Gojo couldn't master the complexity of reverse curse technique, and this was the one thing that allowed him to not only effectively turn on his infinity without frying his brain, but when he did master it, it also gave him access to a secret technique alongside red. What it does is that it reverses cursed energy into positive energy, which can be used to heal any type of damage done to the human body. Basically, it uses the multiplication method of multiplying two negatives to get a positive. When Gojo was in his 3rd year, he basically made reverse curse technique automatically trigger when his brain was being overwhelmed by Limitless and another technique. It also instantly heals him from any attack that reaches him, which allows him to survive Sukuna's malevolent shrine. He was such a genius at it that he even used it to replenish his own cursed techniques, something that no one thought was possible. This means that Gojo would have survived anything that came his way, except for the world-ending slash that Sukuna used. The weakness? It would be the user's head, since the reversed curse technique comes from the brain. That's why when Gojo was cut 1/2 crosswise, he could no longer use it because his upper body had been detached, which is why I wouldn't put it any higher than this. Going back to the thing that I mentioned earlier, what happens when you combine red and blue? Well, you get the color purple, which is what the next ability is called. Its full name is Hollow Technique Purple, and when I say it's OP, I mean it's OP. It's also a secret extension technique that only a few in the Gojo clan know. It combines the divergence and convergence of infinity, which creates an imaginary mass that disintegrates anything in its path. When Gojo used this against Hanami during the Goodwill event, it was so destructive that it carved a cliff into the forest. That changed the entire landscape. Even Todo didn't know if Hanami was exorcised because it left nothing but destruction. When Gojo used Hollow Purple in Shibuya, it was amplified to 200% with the help of Utahime and completely obliterated 4 kilometers of buildings, streets, and anything that stood in its way. Not only that, but if he launches the red and blue orbs and combines them externally, purple becomes an omnidirectional explosion that outright erased Mahoraga out of existence. Yes, the Mahoraga that Sukuna fought one-on-one with during the Shibuya incident. Of course, Gojo's most popular usage of purple was when he discovered it after mastering reversed curse technique after Toji stabbed him in the head. It was a concentrated blast of purple that punched a hole through Toji's body. Note that Jogo was disintegrated with red, but the most damage it did to Toji was a wound on the head, so that goes to show just how durable Toji is, and he was one-shotted. I would have honestly put Hollow Purple higher if not for the Six Eyes, perhaps Gojo's rarest ability. It just entered the top 3, and to be honest, even the series admits that not a lot is known about the Six Eyes. In the history of the Gojo clan, Satoru Gojo was the only sorcerer to be born with both the Limitless and the Six Eyes at the same time, after a whopping 400 years. The last person who had this died in a stalemate duel against the user of the 10 Shadows technique, and no 2 bearers can exist at the same time. 2 different users of the Six Eyes even defeated Kenjaku in the past, which is why he was so salty that he killed the next Six Eyes user only a month after their birth. But what makes it so important? Well, the Six Eyes is pretty non-standard, and it's the bright blue eyes that Gojo is famous for. It's like a passive trait, and it cannot be deactivated, nor does it need cursed energy. However, it is very taxing to the user's stamina, and that explains why Gojo is always wearing a blindfold, because even someone like him can get his energy drained easily by the Six Eyes. What it does though is pretty cool. Not only does it allow the user to have precise control of their cursed energy, but it also allows them to see the flow of cursed energy on an atomic level. The Six Eyes is the exact same reason why Gojo can use the Limitless technique properly, because it allows him absolute control over the complex nature of cursed energy. When Gojo uses a cursed technique, the cursed energy loss he has is infinitely almost zero, so that's why he normally couldn't run out of cursed energy, and automatically keep infinity running 24/7. It even lets him see as far as several kilometers away clearly. With the Six Eyes, Gojo can even read an individual's cursed technique's use and functionally by tapping through the flow of cursed energy. It might be the reason why he became a great teacher for Yuji. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that the only reason why Gojo became overpowered and why he could use the abilities that we've talked about on this list is because of the Six Eyes. Now you might be thinking, what could possibly be more overpowered than the Six Eyes? Well, it might not be as rare, and it isn't even exclusive to the Gojo clan, but the Black Flash ranks in the top 2 on our list. Now, before you go into the comments, let me explain. You see, Black Flash only occurs when the user adds cursed energy to their physical strike within a millionth of a second, which, in turn, then creates those black lightning flashes, and it also increases the destructive power of the strike to 2.5. Not only that, it allows the user to gain 120% of their maximum potential to the point where manipulating cursed energy is as simple as breathing. A lot of sorcerers and even cursed spirits have used Black Flash, with Yuji holding the current record of 7 consecutive Black Flashes. I mean, even Nobara managed to achieve it. But out of all the abilities that Gojo threw at Sukuna, including the 200% Hollow Purple, the Black Flash most likely dealt the biggest damage. Even Gojo and Sukuna, with all their genius, knowledge, and proficiency with cursed energy, cannot use Black Flash at will. That's just how hard this phenomenon is to achieve. But he even managed to beat Nanami's record in terms of landing the most Black Flashes in total. In the Shibuya incident alone, Gojo used Black Flash 4 times, and it was devastating to the point where Mahoraga had to shield Sukuna from Gojo's Black Flashes. Now we won't compare him to Yuji, because Yuji's basically a cheat code when it comes to Black Flash. It may only increase his physical hits, but when going up against someone like Sukuna, physical attacks sometimes matter more. Lastly, for the strongest power that Gojo has in his arsenal, we have his domain expansion, Unlimited Void. When Gojo activates this, it creates a metaphysical space that lets Gojo's target infinitely receive every single known raw information and stimuli, effectively paralyzing them physically and mentally. The only way to escape Unlimited Void is to have Sukuna's domain, or to be in physical contact with Gojo. It is so deadly and such a sure win ability that is equal to Sukuna's own domain expansion, Malevolent Shrine. And the only way Sukuna won the Battle of Domains was because Malevolent Shrine was open and could destroy Unlimited Void from the outside. It is so powerful that once caught, even a being like Sukuna cannot move. Gojo is so precise when it comes to the control of his domain that just like in Shibuya, he can turn it on and off with just 0.2 seconds of activation time, but it already filled all the target's minds with 6 months worth of information. Gojo could even compress Unlimited Void to the size of a basketball by changing the conditions of his domain expansion. This means that Gojo could change the conditions of Unlimited Void into anything he wants. Because it targets the brain, it can turn any normal human or even cursed spirits into a vegetative state, knock out a sorcerer's ability to use reversed curse technique, and even damage Sukuna's brain to the point where he couldn't cast Malevolent Shrine again. That's why it's number 1 on our list, because if it's enough to make the King of Curses do anything he can to stop you from using it, it's beyond overpowered. And with that, there you have it, guys. All of Gojo's powers ranked and explained. It's just unlucky that he died and we couldn't see more of him in the series after his fight with Sukuna, because it would have been awesome to see them duke it out again. Better yet, have you ever wondered just what goes on inside Gojo's mind? Check this video out where I talk about Gojo Satoru's psychology. See you there.